not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Mental Health News Radio, produced by MHNRnetwork.com, your source for information about our favorite subject, mental health. This show is brought to you by our incredible sponsors like ZenCharts.com, the intelligent EHR for addiction treatment organizations, and MyGenetics, that's MyGenetx.com, changing the way people are diagnosed and treated around the world, helping you better understand what makes you well. Don't you want information about yourself that empowers your mental health treatment? Also, who is minding the store, the finances of your behavioral health organization? TriadicLLC.com, that's TriadicLLC.com, is a full-service revenue cycle management and billing company focused on all the ins and outs of mental health billing. Our sponsors help keep this show on the air and advocating for everyone affected by mental health. Guess who that is? Everyone in the world. Take a listen to our show all the way to the end. You don't want to miss Miles the Therapy Dog's special goodbye. Hey everyone, this is Kristen Sinatra Walker, host of Mental Health News Radio, and we're going to talk about something that I've shared about myself quite often on the show. For all of you listeners, there's a wonderful book that's called Healing from Incest, Intimate Conversations with My Therapist, and we have the writers of the book, Geri Henderson and Seanne Emerton. Geri, thank you, and Seanne, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So, Geri, tell our listeners a little bit about your background, just so we can add some flavor to what we're talking about today.
Okay. I'm a university professor with the University of Maryland overseas, serving the military. I grew up on an island, and started off in music. But after getting my master's in music, I switched to literature and writing. So I finished my PhD in that area. And then I began my professional career switching from being a private music teacher.
Okay, awesome. And Seanne, how about you?
Yes, I am a marriage and family therapist in central Nebraska and own a practice employing other therapists. We serve 23 rural county area. And so I work primarily with about everything, because in central Nebraska, you have to be a generalist when you practice, and I love the work. So I've owned my practice for almost 28 years, and prior to that, I was a family therapist within the Social Services Department, Department of Health and Social Services, working with families and children at risk. And before that, well, I got my master's degree in counseling, and prior to that, I majored in liberal arts and religion at a liberal arts school in Lincoln, Nebraska. So I'm still in Nebraska.
Well, you two are quite far apart from each other. Tell our listeners the story of how you connected and how you wound up writing this powerful book together.
You get a start, Geri.
Oh, okay. Well, what Seanne did not say is that she also is a musician, a fine musician, and we met through our music, our interest in music. The cultural community in Nebraska, central Nebraska, is actually pretty small, so we would easily run into each other, and that's how we met. And it is from that connection that I realized that she was a therapist and that I needed help.
Mm. So where were you at where that you knew that you needed help? Because that's quite a big moment. I know that I've had that moment myself. What was going on in your life and about what age, if you don't mind sharing, did this happen where you realized you needed help?
I think I was in my 40s. I'm taking a guess, but I had had therapy. I had been hospitalized a couple of times before.
Okay.
And was on medication and had a first therapist that lost his license in Nebraska. So obviously that didn't work out so well.
No.
And then I had a couple of other therapists that were not very effective. And so I had quit going to therapy. And I don't know if I had quit taking my meds also. So that was kind of a recipe for falling apartness. Seanne, what do you remember?
Yes, well, to be clear, because we're a small community, it's difficult to, like Geri said, you know people, and so I didn't really want to take Geri as a client. I didn't know her very well, but I knew her, and so I suggested other resources for her, but she kept coming back asking if I would take her, and so I could tell she was really not in a good space, and I did then agree to see her as a client. But I believe, Geri, you had been out of counseling for a while when you did seek my services.
Right.
So it took a lot, I believe, for you to realize that it was time to get back in and to have the courage to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Geri, how old were you? Did you know that that incest was happening when you were a child, or is it something that you repressed and remembered later? What was that process like for you?
Because of the splits, I did not know.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, when I went to college, I told people, which seems a bit laughable now, but I told people that, oh, sure, if I had kids, I would want my parents to raise them because they were such good parents.
Yeah. So
it was not, when I became horribly depressed and suicidal, it was not clear to me why.
So was DID something, that dissociative identity disorder, was that something that was talked about with you from other therapists?
No.
Okay.
No.
Gotcha.
Seanne and I broached it, but I really wasn't ready to manage it, and Seanne will tell you that.
Right.
But
yeah, let's talk about that, Seanne.
Well, I'm sorry.
Nope, go right ahead.
Yes. Well, so of course, as therapists, we meet the client where they are. And Geri both wanted help and was scared to death of help. And so it took a long time to create a sense of safety and to begin peeling the layers where she was when she came in. Sadly, she had been traumatized in other therapy experiences. So that made the work much slower. And we had to be very careful, of course, on steps taken. So we couldn't jump right into a DID treatment plan.
Right.
It was more establishing safety, trust, of course, and then beginning the process of gently, I must say, because Geri was fragile, uncovering the layers that she had developed quite extensively to protect herself. So it was like surgically removing layer by layer by layer.
Yeah.
And I didn't complete all the layers during my course of work with her because, as the book describes, she did move abroad to teach before our course of therapy was completely finished. But then she did go on abroad as well as later. And as she will tell you, it seems to be a lifelong journey.
Yes, it is. It is. It is. It is. I have that same lifelong journey, and I knew my father was a problem, and it was real easy to blame everything on him. I didn't actually uncover that my mother was a problem. I did the same thing. Oh, she was wonderful. Oh, she was so there for me, blah, blah, blah. I didn't uncover that until my mid to late 40s, that, oh, mom is a big problem. Not, there was no sexual abuse with mom, but the emotional and psychological abuse and childhood neglect, and leaving me with my father. That was almost worse. Actually, I'm not even going to say almost. I would go through the molestation again, rather than go through the pain of figuring that out about my mother. It was so traumatic. So I get it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, you do.
Wow.
Yes.
I understand that. And as far as the DID is concerned, even though the therapist that I have now is rather, I would say, much more, Seanne, aggressive.
Yes. Yes.
There is no.
I referred Geri to this therapist. You were ready for aggressive at that point.
That's very funny. I was not appreciative, Kristen, not at all. But it took me a long time to even accept the DID diagnosis, and to be okay with it, and not to feel totally weirded out, or that I had made all of these little people up.
Yeah, I'll send you a link to a show we just did, and she's actually going to become a podcaster. Her Twitter handle is the We in Me, and we did a whole show on dissociative identity disorder, and it was awesome. Like, I was never diagnosed with that, but my mother was. And so I was on the receiving end of all of these different parts and so on. It was very traumatic for me, but our whole family, you know how it goes. Seanne, it's a generational thing, man.
Yes.
All kinds of branches on those trees that have all kinds of stuff
right.
go on for generations. But yeah, it helped me to understand it a lot better. And even without a diagnosis like that, you still split in some ways just to get through what exactly is happening to you, because that's how your child brain can protects itself.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely true.
So tell us about, it's so interesting, the two of you writing a book together. Who thought of that, and what was that process like?
All right, Geri, I toss the ball to you first on that too.
Yeah, because I'm the one who suggested it, and actually I suggested it, and then I dropped it, and there were times when not only was Seanne very reluctant, but also involved in like 5 different boards at the same time in the community. So there was no time. But more than that, Seanne was reluctant because of the therapist-client confidentiality issues and things like that. But we hadn't worked together for quite a while, and eventually she came around, and I'll let her talk about that. But I felt that I wanted to write the book I wish I would have had. And I also didn't want to write that book alone, because there are already those books.
Right. And
I also felt that as a person who enjoys writing and who writes quite a lot, I'm the person who should do that. But I just had to convince Seanne that she was the person who should do that too.
I love it. Okay, Seanne, your turn.
Well, yes, of course, it was wrought with ethical issues, and I did not want to do it. And I humored Geri at first, I hate to say, and said, well, why don't you just journal? Let's just journal back and forth, and that might be cathartic. I'll just, I'm not really your therapist anymore. She had her own therapist. And then time passed, and of course, I consulted on this with attorneys, with other professionals, and I had to feel really, and there were all kinds of releases that were involved in that kind of thing. I had to feel very secure to even consider doing it. And I would say it took a life of its own. I kept thinking, well, surely this is a phase Geri's going through, and it will pass. Interest. It will pass. And then, because we can't have dual relationships, and we'd let the time pass, but I still really didn't want to do this book, even though there was nothing actually at that point holding us back from it. But then once we started it, I must admit, I found the practice of writing with Geri illuminating and energizing. And I'm still surprised at that to this day, because we would write remotely. Geri was abroad. Some of the book would happen when she was home again, and we would meet and write. But a lot of it happened on Google Docs, and it took 7 years. It's a short book, really, but it took 7 years.
Oh man, I know. Believe me. I'm trying to write a book with 10 different authors, and I'm the last one to write the chapter. Yeah, I get it. I completely get it. So, Geri, for you, in terms of how open you are about this, obviously you're open about it because you wrote a book about it, but in terms of your family and your acquaintances and so on, how has that been for you to come out with a book that really, there's no holds barred here?
Right. Well, it was very difficult for my family. And when we first started writing, we used nom de plumes because it allowed us to have that freedom. And so we didn't start off using our real names. And then when Seanne was confronted about whether we really wanted to help people or not, and how we couldn't really do that if we hid behind nom de plumes, it would just be the book and there would be no people.
Right.
I came back from overseas, and she said, we need to talk. And actually, I came back, then she came back, because we had met in Germany, and just for a trip. It wasn't.
We have mutual. Well, we have friends there. Yes.
Yeah. So she came back from her holiday, and she said, we need to talk. And I think that I was a bit shocked at first.
Yeah.
Because my time away helped me see that more clearly, that it's a book about being forthcoming about abuse, and how can you not use your real names, and be,
right.
So it just didn't feel congruent with our message of the book. I'm sorry to interrupt, Geri. No. I was waiting for you to chime in. I think I was finished but as far as my family was concerned, that was incredibly tough. And there were some really, really hard moments. And then I thought, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to cancel this whole thing, or other things, it wasn't all of my family, but there was one family member that was very distraught and very upset. And because she said, you lied. You said you weren't going to use your real name. So I think because I had such a hard time with the way I was being treated, Seanne used that as a lever to get me to go to the referred therapist. Didn't you see?
Well, it was an opportunity. It was a window of opportunity, Geri.
That's therapist speak right there, let me tell you. I heard the same thing. This is an opportunity for growth. And I'm like, I want to be in the mud. Thank you very much.
That's right.
I don't feel like a lotus flower right now. Okay? Oh, so what's the response been like for you after it's been published? I mean, how many people are coming forward and saying, "Oh my gosh, thank you." I'm sure there's many, but what has that been like for you?
For me, it's been very gratifying. I've had people reach out on Facebook, and we had a seminar that we did for chaplains and for people who are involved in counseling traumatic uh, sexual abuse, well, and all kinds of trauma.
Childhood
But
trauma, yeah.
yeah, we did that for chaplains over here in Germany. That was organized by the chaplaincy
Hmm.
um, advocacy and support. So we've had people and Seanne has her own experience because that's been with therapists who have with whom she shared the book.
Yeah, that's interesting on a professional level. Did you get any kind of fear from other therapists or sort of a shame finger on why would you do this? This is totally unethical, blah, blah, blah. Did you have anything like that, Sian?
Not to my face.
Thank God.
I don't know, Kristen. I mean, what I have heard has been quite positive, and there's been a lot of support. I don't expect everyone to understand, and because maybe I wouldn't have understood. I didn't want to write the book,
Right, right.
but I'm glad I did, and I have told Geri. I think it's one of the most powerful things I've done in my life with her to do this, because it's been a growing experience for me as well, and I just feel like there's been more clarity in my work as a therapist as a result of having to actually meticulously articulate the process of therapy. It's been enlightening in ways for me to continue to grow. So, I don't regret writing it at all. And there hasn't been, like I said, there hasn't been the pushback I had expected
Good.
amongst professional groups and other things. Maybe it's out there, but I just don't know if it is. So I'm glad I don't know.
I always say this, look, if something, I have had quote unquote friends, and I'm sure, Geri, you can attest to this as well. When you grow up in such toxicity, you attract toxic people as your friends because that's all you know. So, and then as you get healthier, you realize, oh my God, okay, not going to do this anymore. These people can go bye-bye.
Yes.
But it's.
I must say, though, well, I'm sorry, Kristen.
No, go ahead. Go right ahead.
Well, I must say I wouldn't recommend this as something. I mean, I don't know how. I'm glad I did it, and at the same time, it's a very complicated thing to do.
Yes.
And the hardest thing for me has been ramifications with current clients or past clients, because they have a window into. Well, you don't know how people are going to receive it, and you never know when you write a book how people will receive it. But my biggest concern was that I hoped harm wouldn't be done when those that I have worked with in the past or currently are reading it, because I don't want people to expect that I'm going to write a book with every client that comes in the door, or because this is a very rare. Things just lined up, and I really believe Geri needed to do this. And I really believe this story needed to be told. Absolutely. But I can't imagine doing it ever again. That's for sure.
There's raw honesty right there.
Well, it's wrought with complexity, and it took a tremendous amount of energy for quite a few years, because it just was always, working in the background. Even if we weren't writing, of course, we were thinking about it and and struggling with it really, because we wanted it to be out there so that it would help. Proceeds from this go to RAINN on my part, and there was no motivation to become rich and famous from this. It was really, hopefully it finding its hands into the people that could benefit.
Right, exactly. All right. Well, as we come to a close, please, let's start with you, Geri. What are your future plans after this? What's I know there's still lots of therapy. I still go to therapy. Different things come up at different times and different stages of
That's
your
right.
life. So what's on the horizon for you?
Well, I think my therapist is feels that she's on a retainer for life.
Hey, I'm moving to the city where my new therapist is because she's so great. So when you find a good one, you're like, I will be living across the street from your office. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, poor thing. I do sometimes feel sorry for her, but not often. But as far as professionally, when I finish my tour of duty over here, I plan to work in academic consulting and advising, helping young people chart a course through higher education.
Good for you.
So that's what I plan to do after I finish, running around the world.
How about you, Seanne?
Well, I am still a marriage and family therapist and mental health practitioner, so I plan to continue to do my work. I have begun doing a lot more coaching these days than therapy. I'm a little saturated with trauma stories. After all these years, I'm a little saturated. But we all have trauma of some sort, and so I know I will always work with it. I actually love working with people, and I love helping people move forward. So I'm a grandparent now, and my husband and I love to visit our grandchildren in Boston and Fort Collins, and we also love to travel. So I hope I can do a bit more writing in the years to come, and consulting as well. So that's what I'm doing.
Well, please tell our listeners where they can find more about each of you and more about your book, Healing from Incest, Intimate Conversations with My Therapist.
The website is healingincest.squarespace.com. And the email address is healingincest@gmail.com.
Fantastic.
There's a closed Facebook group, Healing Incest. So if somebody wants to reach out to join the group, they can find us on Facebook and ask for an invitation.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for coming on the show. I absolutely appreciate it, and I know our listeners do as well.
Thank
you for having us.
Absolutely. And of course, thanks, listeners, for another edition of Mental Health News Radio. Get ready for it because here it comes. But first, thank you again to our sponsors like EverythingEHR.com, devoted to helping organizations finding the best electronic health record in behavioral health, and Service Dogs by Warren Retrievers, SDWR.org, a nonprofit organization that provides service dogs to those with unique abilities and invisible diseases to include autism, diabetes, epilepsy, and PTSD. Until there's a cure, there's a dog. And hey, an SDWR service dog is at work every day with one of our own team members. If you have a question, visit us at mentalhealthnewsradio.com or our network of podcasters at mhnrnetwork.com. Disruptors, healers, technologists, advocates, and most importantly, voices to be heard from all corners of the globe. Thank you so much for joining us. And now a final word from our therapy dog, Miles.
Good boy.